Dust and debris settle as Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades lock the last titan into Tartarus. The three gods drew lots. Zeus won the lordship of the sky, Poseidon of the sea, and Hades the realm of the void. Hades ruled the dark, grime, and dismal realm of the dead with stern authority. His merciless and mysterious presence was feared by the Greeks. Not many dared to celebrate him in festival and in his name. The only few episodes we heard of the god of the dead were the rape of Persephone. With the approval and assist from Zeus, Hades kidnapped Persephone and married her against her will. Nature withers as Demeter mourned for her loss of her daughter each year, and the coldness of cruelty brings autumn and winter to humanity. We remember Hades as the evil, malicious god who imprisoned the souls of many. But not many remember him as a dutiful, altruistic, humanistic stern god that ensures all of the dead have a fair and just trial in face of punishment. He restored fair judgment for the dead. He unraveled the mortal ties of wealth and prestige which muffled the judgment of the corrupted judges. Everyone in silken and linen stand equal in the underworld. Perhaps the cold and stern Hades only declined the warm flattery of the living to ensure a fair trial. Perhaps the only unfair judgment was ours of Hades, as myths often retold and reaffirmed for the sake of tellers. But what continues to instill such fear of Hades and underworld in us, even after millennia? In Greek mythology, the deity known as Hades or Pluto was one of the offspring of Titan Kronos and Rhea, a brother of Zeus and forcefully the husband of Persephone. One might immediately associate the Lord of the Underworld with a being who was either a monarch or perhaps the equivalent of the devil in popular Christian mythology. However, this is not true. As the Lord of the Underworld, Hades was responsible for what happened and also who were allowed in, and more importantly, making sure the dead did not leave the underworld. Here, the help of his ever-faithful companion Cerberus, the multi-headed dog, came in, whereas the terrible hound greeted new arrivals to the underworld like one would expect from the man's best friend. It would devour those who tried to leave the land of the dead, occasionally his master too. Lord of the Dead. Occasional necrophage on its own is a sufficiently gloomy description. It is therefore no surprise that the character is described was believed to be such, one to be feared and avoided. Perhaps this is also why the reason he was often referred to the multitude of titles, such as Zeus of the Departed. Conversely, the god below, who also thought to be a bringer of gifts to those not yet among the dead, and not thought to be a wicked deity, but a good one. The characteristic bears the relation to one of his names, Pluton, which means the wealthy, by which he might have to be better known thanks to the riches he received whenever an expired mortal received a ticket sans retour to his realm. His other name, Hades, is of uncertain etymology, but might have meant the unseen, possibly related to his helmet, which had the power to turn its wearer invisible. Despite being the Zeus of the departed, he was neither the bringer of death nor he was wicked. He was cold and stern, but also fair, altruistic, and maintainer of balance. Even though it is a well-known deity, it is of little relevance to any myth other than the astrological myth of abduction of Persephone, his niece and wife. The mythical heroes had their own different adventure, but they all had one thing in common. That is, they all went to the same place after death, the underworld. The geography of the underworld implies the cosmological view of ancient Greeks. They believed the underworld was a separate world similar to the living, which also has river, grasslands, and palaces, thus lessening the fear of death. It could not simply be defined by words like beautiful or terrible. One thing certain is that the underworld is located far away from the land of the mortals. The homeland of the spirits, Asphodel, is not a horrible wasteland full of fire, magma, and monster, but rather a satisfying place to live. In Greek myth, the field of asphodel is a wide grassland that will never wither or fall, an idealization of the pasture in the real world. Heroes can have an even happier afterlife in the underworld in Elysian Plain. However, the underworld is by no means an all-charming place. Beneath the above-mentioned places is Tartarus, the deepest part of the underworld. It is the prison for the most vicious souls, with internal darkness and barrenness. Here is a map of the underworld drawn by a French painter in 1850. As you can see from the map, rivers, grasslands, as well as the notorious Tartarus are clearly emphasized. B is the River Styx, the most well-known underworld river. It is the border of the underworld and also the transition point of the dead. The image from Greek underworld continue even further. Here shows the famous painting Charon crossing the Styx by Patinir, a Flemish painter. It depicts the classical subject from Virgil Aeneid and Dante Divine Comedy, a human soul who must decide between heaven and hell. For the iconography of this subject, Patinir draws together biblical images and classical sources. The influence of the classical tradition is notable. The river Styx divides the whole picture into two equal parts. To the right is hell, while to the left is heaven. To cross the river, the dead have to pay a fee to Charon, whose responsibility is to transport the souls of the dead to Hades. So ancient Greeks would bury their deceased friends with a coin put in his mouth as a fee to Charon, or the dead will have to linger lonely on the shore for 100 years. We can also see three-headed dog, Cerberus, guarding the gates of the underworld. Simultaneously, influence from Christian's idea can be traced without much effort. Several angels with wings are hanging in paradise, accompanied by odd tiny souls. Although we can't see the exact expression of the passenger on the boat, the profile face and body towards hell shows he has made the decision. One detail also worth noticing is that all souls were incredibly small, indicating the inability of mortal in presence of the mighty God and inevitable destiny. Patinir thus converts this work into memento mori, a reminder to all those who contemplate it that they must prepare for the moment of death, and that the hard road must be chosen in imitation of Christ, ignoring false paradises and deceitful temptations. The differences between Hades and Hell symbolize a change in the perception of life after death, as paganism was violently supplanted by the ideas and views of Abrahamic religions. The main difference between is that whereas Hell is a abode for the damned, Hades was an abode for the dead. Hades was a place of mindless wandering, but not of pain or punishment. Hades is neither blissful nor horrific. The mission is not decided on a moral ground. The purists and the sinners spent the afterlife together, united in death as they weren't in life. On the other hand, Hell is a realm of eternal suffering, host to the myriad form of punishments, described as both physically and mentally agonizing. Horrific monsters and demons preside over the damnation of the souls for those who violated the sacred commandments of the New Testament and Quran, whereas Hades is an inevitable destination. Hell is not just a place of perpetual moral judgment, but a condition of being without the possibility of redemption until the second coming. A common misconception is that Elysium is the pagan equivalent of heaven and Tartarus as pagan hell. Although Islamo-Christian mythology was certainly inspired by these two realms, there are some crucial differences. The views of Elysium was not a place selected for the moral, the just, the virtuous. Its green and tranquil views were reserved solely for the gods and for few exceptional heroes handpicked by the Olympians. Tartarus similarly was not a realm populated by the most wicked, but a black beast that served as a prison for the primordial titans and for those who tried to trick the gods. Over the years, And after the spiritual domination of Christianity and Islam, the principal ideas of what constituted life and after death changed, both in the minds of people, but also in the way they were depicted in art and described in literature. As Hades becomes synonymous with hell, the images associated also change, depicting cruel punishment and eliminating much of its mythological geography, with its 5 rivers being turned into lakes of fire and its chthonic gods being turned to demons.